All right, test, test, test. All right, test, test, test. Suzanne, Ryan, you guys there?
We are. Well, I am.
Yay. All
I am here.
right. It is 12:30. I'm going to go ahead and do a little intro and tap dancing, and then I'll hand it over to you guys. Who's going to be presenting on your side?
So I'll be sharing the screen,
Okay.
So.
All right.
Yeah, and I'll monitor the chat, and then we kind of have a tag team through the slideshow, but he's taking care of that. But I'll be over on the digital learning channel with the
Awesome.
chat.
You guys are pros. All right. Well, welcome everyone. JCPS Digital Innovation Digital Learning Channel. We have a great afternoon planned for you today. First up, we have Ryan New and Suzanne Kramer going over how can I use questions to build interdisciplinary choice boards. Great topic. Great information there. We will then have Susan Wine and Sherry Rhodes talking about tantalizing technology, which is a great alliteration. I can't wait to see that one. That's a new presentation for me. We then have Dawn Bacon and our own Danielle Washburn going over Tinkercad for NTI lessons. Another great technology-based one there. And then we have student safety and supports at 2 o'clock with Brooke Bird, Crystal Wilder, and Chad Dewberry. And then after that, you'll notice we have a couple more episodes, and they are available on demand if you click on the schedule, which is on the Teacher Toolkit site from the NTI website. So be sure to check those out. They will be there, and I'll let you know as we move throughout the day. And I'm Jim Unger, by the way, from Digital Innovation. All right, Suzanne, Ryan, you guys ready?
Yep.
I am on your screen, and you are ready to go.
Okay, I'll turn on the captions, but I know that they will only work whenever I speak. So that's a bit of a problem there. So,
Okay.
So backed by popular demand, Suzanne and I presented on this actually in the very first week of the NTI schedule. And so we've actually updated and re-looked at how we're using some interdisciplinary choice boards because they've been so popular throughout the district. So here's our question. How can I use questions to build interdisciplinary choice boards? So where we began before is looking at making sure that a choice board isn't just a random assortment of what students might be engaged in, that we can actually provide through questioning a way of structuring using those choice boards. So here we have in the middle of this a compelling question that's going to bind all of the other contents together. Right, that we're using a compelling question as like a gigantic umbrella that allows for all these different disciplines to live. So we're gonna go through then how this compelling question does that, and then how each of the different standards, each of the different contents can actually be represented by what are known as supporting questions that will help them build up student knowledge, agency, and so on towards being able to answer the compelling question. Before we get into how to go about building that and what that might look like as a conceptual model, we wanted to first sort of pause and take a look at what do we mean by compelling and supporting questions. So oftentimes we have the situation, which is very apropos to where we are now, which is where are our students and where do we want them to go? And that questions provide an opportunity to essentially close or open, either way you want to look at it, curiosity gaps. And then oftentimes, in order to get our students invested in the learning process, we have to manufacture some of these curiosity gaps. And one of the best ways of doing that is with compelling questions. We actually I presented about a week's worth on compelling and supporting questions and how those can be used to frame and focus learning. And part of this is lifted from that presentation. So compelling questions do two things simultaneously. So they're not just ornamental. These compelling questions are meaningful, right, as they need to be. The first part here is that compelling questions make space for the learner. They also then make space for the content. And that it's between this balance that we're trying to really hit when it comes to developing quality, compelling questions. So here's my daughter who can use her lived experiences, the things that she has interacted with, right? The so-called windows and mirrors of things, right? To better access a compelling question, right? So it has to be written with her learning in mind. Simultaneously, we're trying to combine, right, because it's interdisciplinary, all the different disciplines and how they might be brought together, right, to make sense of something. And that a compelling question provides an opportunity both to make space for the learner and also make space for all of the contents. So if compelling questions create gaps that challenge students' assumptions and spark the need and desire to make sense of the world as it relates to them, disciplines are lenses that complicate the world, right? So it's a way of sort of being able to see things from multiple perspectives, because that's what the disciplines provide, are vocabulary and skills germane to those disciplines. The goal of education is not to simplify the complex, but to make the complex accessible. Compelling questions help do this. So if we have our compelling question generator and we throw in, right, the different disciplines, we churn that thing up, out pops the opportunity to use compelling questions both in an intradiscipline, right? So if you're here and saying, oh, well, how would I use these questions inside of chemistry? We've actually got a teacher at Central High School who did that. Or it could be interdisciplinary, right, as that we're looking at today. So compelling questions are intellectually rigorous. They are student-friendly, right? They are also motivating, again, trying to create and manufacture some of those curiosity gaps. So some of the questions that are my favorite and compelling question is, what makes a community healthy? You could answer that from an art perspective or from an ELA perspective, from a science perspective, right? How does where you live affect how you live? Again, you can see this from multiple perspectives. We use compelling questions to frame units, or frame, in this case, choice boards. And it's the compelling questions job to get students ready, right? And that question is answered by summative performance tasks, right? So that, again, these questions are not just ornamental, but if a compelling question begins the thinking, the summative performance task closes that thinking, right? It's the answer to that, right? So again, we're not just investigating questions for those questions' sake, we are actually doing something with them. The supported questions, on the other hand, are much more specific to the disciplines, much more specific to the standards. They are the knowns inside of a discipline, the hows, the whos, the whats, and so on, right? And that just as compelling questions are bookended by summative performance tasks, so too are supporting question bookended by formative performance tasks. And these are going to frame individual lessons, or in our case, those smaller sections on the choice board. So that compelling and supporting questions are, they work together. You can't have one without the other, right? Compelling questions provide a larger meaning, right, to the learner, and the supporting questions imbue that learner with the skills germane to that discipline. So these things work in tandem. What good is the top of the stool without its legs? So compelling question would be the stool, the legs are the supporting question. And what good is a roof without the walls that hold it up? So how do I make then a quality compelling question? Again, we can talk about that, and there's another channel that we probably need to link into this part. But notice here we put quality compelling question. You should note that a good compelling question is subjective to the learner, right? So we're trying to look at what is a good compelling question that would be hitting those characteristics that we discussed earlier. The first one is to make sure that you meet the criteria of what makes a great question, right? And those are what we mentioned earlier, right? Kid-friendly, motivational, right? And intellectually rigorous. It's also recommended that you stress test, right, the compelling question with possible responses if you're using these interdisciplinary. So if you have a question like, how does where you live affect how you live? Well, what would that look like for science? What would that look like for PE? What would that look like for all the different disciplines that you might explore? You then want to create a summative performance task that helps align to that compelling question. That means then that as soon as you have a compelling question, you immediately have the assessment, right? For us, we're going to show you some examples here that we've used actually the Fraser History Museum that's developed the Corona capsule that is cataloging all the types of experiences that students are having during this time. They could also be backpack artifacts, they could be essays and or videos, which the last two there are more traditional. Once you've done this, now you can start to create discipline-specific supporting questions that are also aligned to the compelling questions. So these supporting questions give some insight, some understanding, right? Your compelling question. And once you've done that, to book in those supporting questions, we create formative performance tasks that are aligned to those supporting questions that also help students complete the summative performance task. So just as compelling questions need supporting questions, summative performance tasks need formative performance tasks. So I'm going to turn this over to Suzanne, who's going to walk us through some of the proof of concepts of how these might work for elementary, middle, and high.
Good afternoon. When Ryan and I first presented this digital learning opportunity, we had fleshed out the high school proof of concept choice board around a compelling question. And then afterward, we got a lot of questions around, do you have a model for middle? Do you have a model for elementary? And so we really wanted to sort of proof this concept vertically and sort of flesh it out and engage in the process of this planning ourselves in CDLI. So here you can see the elementary choice board for third grade. And what you'll see on both the elementary and middle is that you have the same compelling question and the same summative performance task as in the high school. And so what you have is this connection to community, the Fraser History Museum, the relevance to, of course, our time, and then this sort of overarching compelling question that really engages kids K-12. But what you'll notice are the supporting questions are very specific, as Ryan said, to discipline. And what you should see, and what we very intentionally did, is that the tasks and questions not only scaffold or feed into the compelling question in terms of processes, skills, and topics, but also they scaffold vertically. So what you'll see here, if you were to try to pull out some of the math tasks or the music tasks or the science task or ELA, what you would see is this vertical articulation. An eighth grade student probably shouldn't be being asked to do the same thing as a third grade student, right? And so what we've tried to do here is really show how the tasks, standards, performances, how they should grow in complexity over time and how they should feed into the middle. And so if you'll go to the next slide, Ryan, thank you. This is our middle school example. And so what you can see here from the elementary, for example, math task where students are looking at a map and they have a little T-chart there with some data. And then if you look down in the very middle bottom task, how does disease affect access to supplies? Here we have a supporting question that clearly feeds that compelling question in the middle. And then what you see is two sort of sub-questions, task-oriented sub-questions. How long will my toilet paper last? And how long can I go without getting groceries? And so in the eighth grade, we know that students are learning more about functions. And so what this task, both of these tasks represent is the application piece of rigor in the mathematics classroom. And then another piece I wanted to call out about this middle school sample choice board that we'll get to, that will kind of be made more clear here soon, is that we're starting to see up in the left-hand corner and then in the bottom right, you have an ELA and a social studies task respectively. And so what you're seeing here is that these two boxes are beginning to be connected. So in our ELA task, students are learning about the 1918 influenza pandemic. They're reading some things on the CDC. They're reading some stories of Kentuckians who lived through that. And then they're journaling or doing a video blog about their own experiences. And then they're interviewing someone else and then doing some contrast about how our lives are changing in this time. And then if you look at the social studies task down on the right-hand side, you have 3 sources that are external, that are articles, and then source D is actually the student's experience as referenced up in this ELA task. So our ELA performance, the work that we're doing, the thinking that we're doing in ELA, is providing the sourcing for source D in social studies. And so you can see how now in this iteration 2.0, we're starting to see those supporting questions come together a bit more. And so I'm really excited about the work that our team did here, Deeper Learning resource teachers, our content leads and coaches, because I really think this fleshes out this concept and it shows how each task feeds that compelling question and how we can see this vertical articulation beginning to emerge.
Suzanne, can I add real quick that one thing that we did is you'll notice some hashtags, right? Because there's sometimes about a choice board and there's some indication about what if they don't cover all of the different things. Do you want to talk a little bit about the hashtags that we have here?
Yes. And so the way that these are designed, we know that students need to have choice in choice boards. We don't want to be assigning the entire choice board to students. That defeats the purpose of the student agency piece. And so we sort of developed a system where the hashtags are sort of the must-dos and those that aren't hashtagged are the can-dos. And so if we were planning on an interdisciplinary team in a middle school or in an elementary school, we know those sort of non-negotiable standards, those non-negotiable skills that we really want to see student performance on. And so we might require those tasks, but then the others would be optional. And so we may say you have to do all of the required and 2 of the optional. And then, of course, all of these tasks then would come together for that summative submission to the Fraser that answers that question, how can disease change the world? And students could call on both their required tasks and their optional tasks in that reflective or summative piece. And then this is the high school example that Ryan and I had previously refined for this presentation. And I think the interesting thing is here, we worked on this high school example, we fleshed it out, it was ready to go. And then just very naturally, we even engaged as our CDLI department in this work in backward planning. We went from the highest level, high school, right? We had the compelling question and we planned backwards. And so having this sort of highest level of performance, you can clearly see this sort of backward plan all the way down to the 3rd grade. And so hopefully these offer folks just a proof of concept in how these pieces fit together. And I think as teams begin to use these to support their own work, what they should really be thinking about is, what is the sort of bundle of standards? What is the relationship between the compelling question, the supporting question? How does the task in performance show mastery of those standards? And then how do those pieces fit together and interrelate? And then it just sort of becomes a puzzle. So I know when Ryan and I were working on this high school one, we got a couple pieces in place. Our team wrote, we refined, and then we were able to fill in these puzzle pieces. And the further you got into it, the more quickly it came together. So hopefully these are useful for teams as they begin planning around interdisciplinary compelling questions in their own schools. And so this graphic kind of shows the thinking that we were doing. This is kind of offers a framework for interdisciplinary planning. And our hope is that this framework can kind of become a core of the conceptual understanding of interdisciplinary planning. And then as we move into next year and we begin to do more and more interdisciplinary planning across and within our levels, that we could build this out. So you see at the top the compelling question, each supporting question sort of siloed there by discipline, which is what you see in that high school example. We know that those lessons and the formative tasks have to stem from those supporting questions and then lead to those performances from the choice boards that answer the compelling question. And we know that the success criteria and models and feedback need to happen all throughout that model. And so I think in the middle school example, what you started to see is how the social studies and the ELA question up in the left-hand top and the bottom right, how they're kind of beginning to talk to each other. And so then if we go back to the model, in the next slide, you can kind of see how, oh, look, could a single supporting question be over multiple disciplines, right? And so then here we're building coherence for students. So we have this common compelling question. We have the supporting question that might be interdisciplinary with multiple tasks and lessons underneath it. And then the same thing where students have these performance tasks that are then answering the compelling question, and they have a summative performance that's showing their sort of complete cumulative understanding of all of those standards and big ideas that they've been engaged in. And so our hope is that this kind of thinking, where questions really are the conduit for interdisciplinary planning, that this little core can be built out. And of course, soon we would begin to, you'd see a box or some kind of layer on here around standards. You might see the CTE or pathway component, right? And so, but if we can use questions as an entry point for interdisciplinary planning, then that kind of can help bring us to the table. Sometimes our standards don't talk to each other, and they weren't designed to in some ways. But if we can come together around these relevant big ideas, these compelling questions that kids care about, then it gives all disciplines an entry point, and it creates a more coherent experience for students.
Well said. And just so you guys know, we've linked in. If you click on the choice boards, these here, they're actually linked in. They're all in actually the same document. So you'll be able to see those there if you want to see them a little bit more up close. Sometimes it's hard to see on these presentations. So we're going to end today by saying that there's different ways that you might do this. So these are just examples of how you might schedule this. Susan and I put this together where, once again, you're seeing the hashtags being used as these might be the ones that you're definitely going to use, right? And the other ones are more optional, right? And so this is just a way of pacing this out for students. And you might share something like this with them to help them pace through their day. You'll notice that on Friday, that there's not much, right? That there's an overlap, and it's because Friday would be really about pulling together all of what they've learned to be able to answer that summon and performance task as it relates to the compelling question. Another example of this that's more structured, right? Where you're sort of giving, as my kids have, right, from Bowen Elementary, they've got things each day they want to do. So this is just a different way of looking at it, where you're really allowing the kids to see what kind of questions do I need to investigate. And this is something that I really encourage, is that I used to say to my kids, what did you learn in school? Now I say, what questions did you investigate in that day? And that actually makes space for me as a parent to enter into the conversations where the kids are also experts in what they've been looking at. So that's pretty much our overall understanding of this. And if you guys have any questions or comments, or you want us to look at some of these choice boards that you guys have been looking at, we're happy to do so. A big shout out to J-Town Elementary and Shelley, and also at Carrick Elementary with Carrie, that they both reached out and sort of said, hey, can we take a look at this? And they did a great job of sort of just taking baby steps in this process, right? Where the first was just trying to get a choice board built, then trying to use a compelling question, then using a supporting question, and then working on the tasks. So you don't have to create all of these overnight, that there is an evolution as you move through this. So thank you guys very much.
Yes, thank you. And I also wanted to, I know Ryan brought up the intradisciplinary piece, and a school teacher that has done an excellent job with that is a chemistry teacher, Caleb Johnson, at Central High School. And so he created leveled chemistry choice boards that both show mastery of comprehensive sort of chemistry work, but that also are preparing his students who are going on to advanced placement chemistry. There's tasks scaffolded for them on there, and there are hashtags that show them which tasks they should do, and they're around a compelling question having to do with waste management or water. And then each task is intradisciplinary in that it gets at some of the NGSS standards and practices. They connect even to other disciplines. And he has had, great student feedback. 85% of students there say that this is engaging, that they like the work, the quality of the work has gone up. And so just a shout out to a high school teacher who's really walking the walk there at Central High School. And we so appreciate him taking our very small little idea and running with it and making it great for kids. So don't hesitate to reach out to CDLI. We're always happy to support you, and we love seeing this great work happen for kids and families.
Yeah, awesome presentations, and I know there's awesome work going on around the choice boards out there. I really like how you guys took the first presentations you did on choice boards and compelling questions, and you've built on that. I really like we're talking about the stress test. I think that's just a great idea when teachers are collaborating, working in their PLCs, that they can come up with the different questions or responses they may get as far as supporting questions or responses to that. That was a great idea. I like the stress test term. I also liked when you guys talked about making sure you don't assign the entire choice board, because that takes away the choice out of board, and you're just giving them an assignment board at that point. So that was really nice, and I like the little hashtags to mark, make a difference between them so that they know what's can do, what's must do.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of flexibility in all this, and as we are seeing that this is more the norm than anything else, it's actually providing a lot of great opportunities to really discuss, like, how do we focus sort of learning in a time where learning is difficult, right? And, we don't want to just have a series of boxes that we have to check each day, but it's really about trying to make some meaningful connection when oftentimes it's a parent or an older sibling or just the student themselves trying to figure this out. It's very difficult to figure out complex things in isolation. And so trying to make and simplify the process in a highly structured way is one way of doing it. And the questions help provide a lot of that structure.
Yeah, I really appreciate, I know I brought this up before, but the interdisciplinary part of it, having that where it's not just one content area. You've got social studies, science, language arts, the related arts, all of those teachers working together. Even though it's just one big question, they may be working on different supporting questions, but at least it gives the student and the family a theme to go with. It makes the connections that much stronger for every class that joins in on that.
And I think how often we've experienced, or we think about, especially older kids, why am I learning this? Why does this matter to me? When we have, our disciplines are important to us because we love them, but literary analysis isn't necessarily important to a seventh grader. We have to make the case for that. We have to engage them in a way that speaks to them, right? And so I think this sort of answers that question. It inherently, with the compelling question, it gets at the why for students, right? And hopefully, I know we've had some choice boards where our deeper learning team has linked in Genius Hours and passion projects where students are coming up with their own supporting question. And we have that actually on our middle school choice board here. And so then even further, students are doing their own inquiry in parallel to this sort of teacher facilitated inquiry that's happening on the choice board. So I think that's a real powerful opportunity as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you bring up a good point, and it's something we had talked about, and we're kind of referencing an article over at Digital Innovation right now. And it's, you don't want to drain the fun out of it for the students, because if they're not enjoying it, they're really not going to be taking that much in. It's the same as in a classroom. You got to have that engagement part to make sure you pique their interest, and you got to make sure you don't lose focus of that in NTI. It can be very powerful, but you also need to be very aware of it, if not more so than normal. Great presentation, as always. Thank you, Ryan, Suzanne. Thank you very much. Great job in the chat pulling that in. Big thank you to Sade Graves and Matt Balka in the chat from Digital Innovation. You'll see them in there all afternoon. If you have questions, you want to say hello, we need to feel that love during NTI. Get out there, say hello, let us know where you're from. And I'm Jim Unger from Digital Innovation. Thank you, Ryan, Suzanne. Next up, we have that awesome alliteration, tantalizing technology with Susan Wine and Sherry Rhodes. And I'm at 12:59. Ladies, are you here?
We're here.
There's Susan.
Yes, I'm here too. Sherry's here.
or sharing your screen, I should say.
Okay, ready to share screen?
Yeah, Susan, are you sharing your screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, you're on it. Good job. Oh, look at that, the Bitmojis.
Okay, so are we good?
If you want to hit
Up it in present
to
mode.
make it full size.
Yeah. Yes.
Top right, beside the yellow. Oh, there we go. And if you would, can you turn on closed captioning for me? Do you know how to do that? Oh, look at that. You're right
do.
there.
Well, this is telling me text size. Oh, there it is. Oh, I see. Okay.
Outstanding.
Are y'all ready to get started? Or should we wait a few?
You're good. It's 1 o'clock. Yeah, you guys have your time.
Okay. So I'm Susan Wine, the academic instructional coach at Dunn Elementary, and I have a fifth grade teacher with me.
Yeah, Sherry Rose. I teach fifth grade at Dunn. I'm also gifted and talented certified.
So we're here to share how at Dunn Elementary, how we've adapted our NTI instruction to increase our student engagement, promote collaboration among colleagues in the building, and ease stress at home during this unprecedented time. So let me go to the next slide. So one of the things that we've really tried to focus on with the children being at home is really trying to connect them. We really want to connect the students across grade levels, but also among grade levels. So we have created some interactive things that we can do whole school. The first one that we came up with was called Fun Friday. As you can see, I like alliteration. So just wanted to share just a few things that we've done. So what we did is we shared this, I shared this with the teachers. And each week on Fridays, the students, rather than doing their regular activities from their choice board with their teachers, or some of the teachers have been doing the schedule format, every Dunn student has an option of doing Fun Friday. So the first week, they watched a little video about kindness. It was the Steve Hartman series. And we had them do a little Flipgrid, how their family expressed gratitude. So the next one, the next week they visited the San Diego Zoo. And so they clicked here for directions, which is basically me on a screencastify of how to do it. They went to a Seesaw account and they responded to what they learned about the zoo. Some of their responses on Seesaw are super cute because they have choice, which is really important. They can simply type things in. They can video themselves. They can add pictures. They can add, of course, video. Kids have really responded to this and have loved it. And we've gotten a lot of feedback from parents, too, about how much they love being able to do something a little different. And then they can see some of the responses that their friends are doing as well. I'll show you what I did here to kind of connect grade levels. When they went on to their Seesaw account, let's see. All right. I'm going to take you to Seesaw real quick. What I did is I just created an account, a very secure account for each grade level. So when the kiddos go in, they can go in and click on, they actually sign up for their grade level, and then children can see each other's responses in the grade level Seesaw. So the next week we focused on Earth Day activities. It was a few days past Earth Day. There are links here for them to watch different appropriate videos, and they're leveled for K through 2, 3 through 5. there were directions on how to do a Padlet. And this is one of my favorites. When they did the Padlet, had questions for them to consider. And kiddos really got involved across the entire school, and they can all see these responses. They came in and did the cutest things. Some of them, again, they had choice. They could upload a video. They could upload a picture. They could, some of them wrote poetry. It looks like somebody wrote a song and sang a song right here. And so this was a really great way, again, for us to have the families and the children be connected during this time when they're at home. The next one, actually the one that's for tomorrow, the kiddos are going to be exploring Kentucky. I kind of spun this off of the Kentucky Derby. And so what they do is they click on this, and we'll talk a little bit about this. I'll let Sherry talk about ThingLink, some of the options for them to respond. But this is an interactive activity where they can click and then do different things all based around Kentucky. This takes them on to a horse farm. Here's about Kentucky watersheds. There's Falls of the Ohio. I created a YouTube channel that has lots of different videos about the Kentucky Derby. It's very kid appropriate. And so then after the kiddos go here and explore, then they go to Flipgrid and create there. And I'm not sure if this is going to let me in because it's the way I have it set up. Yeah. So they go to Flipgrid, and it basically has a background of Kentucky, and they're going to say that they learned. So next week's is super cute. I don't have that on here yet, but they're going to be taking a trip. It's all about Walt Disney. And so they're going to be listening to a biography and then kind of going through time with the Disney, and they do different things. And if we have time, I could share that. So another thing that we've done to involve the kiddos is an estimation extravaganza. And I've shared this among Zone 3. And so each week the kids, we use Jamboard for this one. And the kids go into it, and this is the first week. So there's a picture of items. The first week, I believe, was, yes, a little cup of almonds. And so the kids post their estimation, and then late on Friday, I post the answer for them. And then each week, there are different things. Like the second week, they had to, it bounced off of the idea of the small cups. So then they had to take the information about the small cup of almonds and then determine how many were in this very large container. And so look, as you can see, the answer is already posted, and some of the kiddos did their estimation. This week is hilarious. This is one of my personal favorites. This week they had to determine how many sheets were on the roll of toilet paper. So just sort of having a little bit of fun with it. And I know that the kids have responded and saying they really enjoy it. So the next thing that we have done is called Dolphin Discussions. And teachers have been posting this into their Google Classrooms. The first week, it was more grade oriented. So I did one for each grade level. So the whole grade can access this particular Padlet. And this one, they had to write a multiplication equation to represent the number of glass doors in the picture. So each of the pictures are the same. However, the standard, it's appropriate for the grade level. So it's connected to the standard. So like that was, and then here's the one for kindergarten. So it's the same picture, but a different question. How many glass doors do you see in the top row? So the kiddos can go in and respond to that. This one is, here's the one for next week. This one is, we're going to be doing a family game day. And so the kiddos can go in and respond in their Seesaw account. And I got this actually from this is the district published this on their site. And so basically they can go in and choose a game that they'd like to play. And then after they play the game, then they can respond and tell us what sort of math strategies they used. And then finally, so not only have we been trying to really focus on connecting the families and connecting the children in some way through these learning experiences, we've also really been cognizant of trying to design cross-curricular lessons so that, it's all in one place and we can combine. So this is one that I created for the entire school. It focuses on thinking strategies. And so I sent it out to our teachers, and then they were able to, copy and paste if needed, adapt. But it was pretty great for most grade levels, specifically second through fifth. I know that the K and 1 teachers had to make some adaptations to it. But again, this is connecting kind of a spinoff of the Earth Day. It's connecting our literacy standards to science standards. And so the kids, here's before reading. They had to activate their schema. This is just a video. When you click on the picture, it's me reading the story to the children. I did that on Screencastify. And so I just read little bits and pieces, and then I stop. And then on the next slide, they have an opportunity to respond. And so what a lot of our teachers did is they just took this slideshow and then they shared a copy of it in their Google Classroom. And so then their kiddos were able to respond to the different prompts, and the teachers were able to see their thinking. So here they had to write down their questions as they were listening. The next part, questions that they have, let's see, start. What might Liam be thinking? How do you think he's feeling? So they had to sort of examine that picture and really think about the picture clues. This is a character traits, and then they had to respond to character traits. That was a Padlet. And a lot of our kids participated in this. So they had to identify the character trait and then examples from the text. And so I gave them an example, and then the kiddos, there we have a little picture of one. And so then when they were finished at the end, there were some responses. And then in the end, this was because the Curious Garden is actually based off a real place, the High Line in New York. This was a video all about the High Line for them to connect it to real world. And then the next slides are all about the Lorax. And so rather than me reading it, I actually connected it to it was like a little movie, a cartoon of the Lorax. Again, they have places to respond, and then they were comparing the two stories, how they were alike and how they were different. In the end, in this next slide, they have videos to watch about our Earth. And so it teaches them different things about recycling and composting. So they could watch the videos, and then finally, they have an opportunity to demonstrate their learning in different ways and submit it to their teacher. A lot of teachers used this, and it went over multiple days. I mean, this definitely wasn't a one-day lesson. This could be an entire week or more, depending upon the grade level. So that's sort of some of the stuff that we're doing at Dunn to try to connect everyone. I know Sherry has been doing some really amazing things with her colleagues, so I'm going to let her take over next.
Okay, so I'm not going to drive through everything that we're doing, but I do want to talk a little bit about how this all started amid our 5th grade team. First, we really wanted to give a lot of voice and choice to our students and our parents, because obviously parents are taking on a new role on top of their work at home. So we asked a lot of the students and parents, what are things that you're nervous about in regards to NTI? We asked the parents the same. We even interviewed our own family members. So for instance, I talked to my own children who have actually been engaged in NTI for several years. And some of the things that we heard back were obviously parents worried about the technology component and being able to navigate Google Classroom. And then my own children were like, well, it's very hard when teachers post something every single day in Google Classroom because things begin to get lost in there. So we took all of this information that we gathered from parents and students and just talking to other people and kind of put it all together into how can we start putting together maybe reading in social studies, reading in science. How can we put maybe even input math and all of that? We kind of put math to the side, and our math teacher is using the same format that the myself and our social studies and all of us as science teachers together and kind of separated those out a little bit. So basically what we are doing is really what Susan just showed you in her format of all of the tasks for the entire week are in one slides document. So as a gifted and talented teacher in previous schools that I've worked in, it's always been difficult as in a Title I school to meet the needs of my gifted students when the focus was oftentimes on those struggling students. So I started using HyperDocs. And HyperDocs follow a very specific format of students explore, then they engage in a task, they apply their learning, and then they create something. So these templates follow somewhat of that HyperDoc format. And that's where that kind of constructed for me. The other thing that I wanted to make sure to implement was familiarity. So most of our students, they work on Chromebooks at school. Some of them are working on Apples at home. Some of them have iPads. So just talking to parents, it was like, I can't just put Control-C, Control-V, because that's different to cut and paste on an Apple computer and, just little things like that. If you look at this slide here, there's the close reading anchor chart. This is where familiarity comes in. This is the anchor chart that is in our reading classroom. So students are very, very familiar with this chart. And I didn't want to throw anything new at them. I always take pictures of all of my anchor charts so that I can really, for me, it's reference for the next year, but also to be able to share with students who might be working with an ECE teacher. And that way they have it as well when they're in a different environment. So this really helped students like, okay, take a look at our anchor chart again. So Susan, could you click on the Industrial Revolution?
Yes. I was hoping you would let me click on those. They're amazing. All right.
So, this presentation here is actually what our students are working on this week. And we're just combining some reading and social studies together. So you can go on to the next. So we lay out just like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and of course on Friday, like Susan said, our students are doing Fun Friday. And we tell students, this is just a suggestion. If they want to complete them all in one day, obviously they can do that. But our team goes through each of these and we think about, how long might this take our students? So on this task, they're just watching the videos on prefix, suffixes, and root words. And then they go through and review. This is really review for them. What is a prefix? What is a suffix? And then what is a root word? Okay, you can go to the... All right, this graphic organizer is not new to the students. So this to me is really important about not putting an organizer or something so new that it throws students off right now. I feel like they have, and this is my personal opinion, I feel like they have enough on their plates than to try and figure out how to use a graphic organizer that they've never used before. So this one here, where we were just kind of looking at the word trans, and that's okay, you're fine. And then how that might relate to the Industrial Revolution. And then they go through a little deeper exploration. So if you want to hit the explore part, this actually links to another set of slides where they're reviewing prefixes, suffixes, root words. These little things that are on these slides, these are all things that they already have in their notebooks. So these were not new to them because, again, at the end of the year, reading is primarily review grade. So those are not new things. It's just kind of a little more review to them. Okay, you can go to the next slide. Next. Right here, they're just, activating their schema on the Industrial Revolution. And then, just like Susan showed, this is a link to a ThingLink exploration where they're exploring different inventions during the Industrial Revolution. So obviously, each of these links is explains a different invention. What I really tried to focus on through this are different avenues. Some of these are things that they will read. Some of them are videos. And we really try to link our students to tasks that have a read option. So, for example, we have Storyworks. So they might be linked to a Storyworks article. Ducksters has the option at the bottom where they can have it read to them. And then also in the ThingLinks, it has an option where it could be read to them as well. So that really has helped out the collaborative efforts with our ECE team for students to have that option to have it read to them. Okay. And then this is where voice and choice come into play for students. So if you click on that project methods, I always try to give options for students. So on this one, if you hit present, that'll get bigger. So each of these things, the students know if it is underlined and in a different color or underlined in bold, then they know that that's something that they can click on. So these are just some different options for students to present their learning. So they had the directions on the left side of what to do. So they could have created a ThingLink or a storyboard, a Powtoon. And what I typically do just in my classroom alone is as I introduce something to students, I might introduce it with a Powtoon. Or if you noticed on the previous slide, I used a ThingLink. So the students are already seeing an example of it before they're creating it. So that kind of, most students want to go straight to, can I create Google Slides? Well, that's great, but they are very familiar with that. So I like them to try to do new things. And when they see something new, they're more willing to try it. So of course, students just move on and then they take an interactive tour. And then we just go through kind of reading-based tasks for each of the explorations. So what this has really helped our fifth graders with is, and parents, I shall say, is really keeping everything in one place. I have very, very high completion rates with the students. And to be honest, not a lot of questions. I get a lot from parents like, thank you that all of this is together in one place, because students aren't trying to figure out where they need to go. because it's all right there in the one document. And what's great for us is we're already able to make that copy for them in Google Classroom, so we can provide feedback daily just by going into the documents, or if we're using a Google form, we can put in immediate feedback. Our next task is a breakout using the social studies and reading standards. So just really kind of putting things in one spot for all of our students, bringing that familiarity back to them to kind of help comfort them is really important right now. And then also giving them options to engage with their peers. So of course, Flipgrid is a great place to do that. And then lastly, just kind of moving forward and how this option can be used to meet the unique needs of various students. I will say one of the great things about this is those students who typically lose their papers are really staying on track and keeping things together. So, that's been really helpful for some of the students.
Well, and I think too, Sherry, it's so easy. I like it even from the teacher standpoint, because everything is just in one spot.
Mm-hmm.
When you go to look at it, you're not going in so many different places trying to find things within Google Classroom.
Right. Absolutely. And that's one thing with the choice boards. And I've used choice boards in the classroom before. A lot of our students were just really struggling with, keeping up with all the different tasks in different places and then sharing it. And so I had created a one-stop shop for them to turn everything in. And that was definitely very helpful with the choice boards, because that the first week of NTI, we used the district created choice boards, and they loved the activities, but then they just started getting overwhelmed with, well, I got to share this and I got to do this. And so that's where some of the feedback came, to kind of put everything in one spot.
So we're super excited. I know we're running short on time, 27. We are just super excited to, they say there's a silver lining in every situation. And this really has allowed us the opportunity to work with our teachers to encourage collaboration, but also just different ways that we can incorporate technology, give students voice and choice, meet individual needs through technology, these lessons that we've been forced to create during NTI. So we're really excited about moving forward for when we do get back to school, and continuing to implement some of these things that we showed you today.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you guys, that's amazing. Yeah, I saw Screencastify, Flipgrid, Seesaw, Padlet, Google Slides, Google Forms, ThingLink, Jamboard, Powtoon. So many pieces of technology you guys are using. That is amazing. And if you can spread that through your school and get other people just using, I don't know, one or two of those, that is awesome. That is so much student engagement there. And we think that's going to be one of the benefits too, or some of these things that should carry over when we do come back. It's just some good skills and tools to have. I really liked how mindful you guys were. You talked to parents, brought in that stakeholder information. It was just really thoughtful. And like thinking about the different platforms. Are they on an iPad? Are they on a MacBook? Are they on a Chromebook? Just, that was really awesome. But then still keeping some of those familiar tools that they know from when they were in school, like the graphic organizer. I mean, so they're familiar with that. It just was really amazing over at Dunn. That's great stuff.
Thank you so much.
You guys have about a minute or so left. Is there anything you want to add? I know I was talking a lot there. I apologize.
No, yeah. I've said everything. Sherry, you have anything to add?
No, I'm excited just to see, like you said, Susan, where it goes for next year, because I think teachers now have a little more time to explore these.
Absolutely. And the kids, getting the feedback from the kids has been has been wonderful. They'll send me messages like, this is fun, or the Curious Garden that they were doing. I'm getting messages from them and how much they love it.
Yeah, and that's what we were talking about with the choice boards in the last episode was, when the students are having fun and they're engaged, they're going to learn so much more. And this is a time that we can kind of push, we were still following the standards as our base, but we can build a little bit different than we ever have before. And it just such a great time if we take advantage of it, which you guys certainly are.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us today.
No problem. Thanks for coming on. Dunn Elementary, thank you for loaning them out. Great job, ladies. Appreciate it. Sherry and Susan. Awesome. All right. So I'm Jim Unger. This is the JCPS Digital Learning Channel. You are watching our virtual trainings. We have our third one coming up, which is going to be using Tinkercad, which will be quite fun. I'm waiting on that one. We've had 2 great episodes this afternoon. One on using questions, building their choice boards for interdisciplinary work between content areas. There was some great building going on there. We just had the ladies from Dunn Elementary on talking about tantalizing technology and the amazing buffet of tools they're using with their students. It was just great. And we have Tinkercad coming up next with Dawn Bacon and Danielle Washburn, our own JCPS Digital Innovation. We have student safety and supports after that, and then a couple of on-demand episodes that we'll talk about. And if you go and look, we just had that great presentation. If you want to see Ryan and Suzanne's presentation on choice boards, it's on the digital learning schedule. If you click on their names, it'll bring up the link, and you can see the presentations that people have linked, so you can get another idea of all these resources. And don't forget also that our episodes will be on demand. We take all of these sessions, break them up into little bite-sized chunks, and we post them to the channel. So hopefully you've hit that little red button down below that says subscribe on it, and you will get notified whenever we update and we add those. All right, so enough from me. Danielle, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Not too bad. Enjoying this awesome Thursday.
I know, and it's beautiful outside. Pretty soon we're gonna go outside and enjoy the weather.
I know, I had to close my curtain so I wouldn't look at it.
I know. And I am really excited about the next show. Anyone that knows me knows that I always say I'm a math nerd and a coding nerd. I may not know everything about coding, but who does, right? I just want to say thank you to Dawn Bacon for agreeing to come on the show and agreeing to say yes. He is an amazing STC at Iroquois High School. He does everything you can think of: esports, computer science. I mean, the list can go on and on. So thank you, Dawn, for coming on the show and sharing your knowledge about Tinkercad.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you all for having me, and thank you so much. I try to like learn a little bit about everything, and then I can share that with my students, and I'm happy to share that with everybody else, especially during this time.
Thank you. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you so you can share your knowledge.
Okay. I'll probably share my screen most of the time.
Okay.
But I'm Dawn Bacon from Iroquois High School. I've been over there about 10 years, and I started teaching engineering technology just 4 years ago. And it's been a ton of fun, and Tinkercad's one of the things that we jumped into, I guess during that first year, that has just really helped us move forward. Let's see. I have to remember how to share my screen. There we go.
I'm loving the headset, by the way. I know you and Matt and Jim really love the headsets. I need to get me one of those.
Yeah, I am a gaming nerd, and so
Yeah.
I have it for me for all of that. So Tinkercad is it's made by Autodesk, or it's sponsored by Autodesk, I guess I should say, which is the company that we use for our computer-aided design program. That's what CAD stands for our engineering technology classes. And so this is a great introduction into that computer-aided design world. I don't have like the computer I use at school is like my desktop that's there. And so I don't have that with me, or else I'd show you that program as well. But it's really like this complex sort of thing that you learn how to do all this drafting. You're learning how to do extrusions and all of that stuff, building towards being able to make things within the industry. And so for us, we like to show students Tinkercad first, just to give them an introduction into what this is like. The cool thing about Tinkercad as well is you can use it on any device. So if you've got an iPad, if you've got you can even use it on a phone. If you got an Android tablet, anything at all, you can actually open it up on a browser, and they have an app as well. And so you can dive into that and really get in there. But let me go ahead and dive in first. So you can sign in with your Google credentials. So getting in there is just as easy as it is signing into any other Google apps. Once you're in, the first thing that you'll see is actually something called like learning the moves. And it just kind of shows you how to move around within the 3D Tinkercad. But once you get there and you sign in afterwards, this is the dashboard. And so the dashboard's got all of the things you've been working on. And so you can see all the little things that I go through doing and stuff like that. And I'll go through a lot more of these today. And then through here as well, you've also got up at the top classes. I'll actually open this up this time. I don't use this tab, but what you can do is that you can create a class. It just has you go through, give it a name, tell them what kind of class it is. And then once you're inside of there, it gives you a class code. So you could use that class code, share that with your students, and you can add them into Tinkercad. I didn't do that just because I already have students in Google Classroom. I didn't want to add another thing that they needed to sign into and whatever else. And so what I usually have them do is take a screenshot of what they make in here and then share that with me through Google Classroom. There's a gallery, and in the gallery, it's just all kinds of stuff that other people have made. It looks like somebody's working on a little Mother/Father's Day project right there, which is kind of cute. And so that stuff is there. If you ever want, you can also like search up here. And so if you were looking for something, maybe you wanted to make, like a lot of my students wanted to make phone cases. And so if you just type that in, what you'll find is that people have already started working on stuff like that. And if you go through there, you can find one that's blank. And so it's already got the specifications, it's already got all the measurements, and what you're going to do is just kind of add on to it. If you wanted to 3D print something or something like that. So the gallery and the search are great. They have a blog where they kind of keep you up to date with all of the updates that they do. And then the Learn tab is really what I want to talk about most with you all. And so using Tinkercad, even though it's not precisely what you would end up using in the industry, it is absolutely great because it's starting those building blocks for students. They're kind of build some self-efficacy in working in 3D. A lot of students I've found, especially in engineering, they come to class and they've already decided sometimes, maybe I'm not good at math, maybe I'm not good at science. And so that kind of takes them away from some of the experiences that they have in those classes. And I get to kind of open that back up with them. And I'm like, well, maybe you've done this in this way before, but now we're doing something that's a little bit new. And so building self-efficacy for not just my class, but for the other classes is something that I really try to do. And part of that is doing some of these little projects that get students involved. So on that Learn tab, so again, once you signed in, if you go to Learn, the first thing that it has is starters. If you've never used any kind of 3D design program before, I highly suggest that you start here. It does work a little bit easier with a mouse, in my opinion, but that will not stop you at all from getting into it if you've just got another kind of device at home. And so what the starters do is, they make it as easy as possible for you to really get involved with this. And so like each of them is just like a couple of steps. And what it'll do is that it will show you, like this gives me like a little orange outline. And over here on the left side, it just gives you the steps. And it's like, hey, you see this orange shape on the work plane? Okay, go get a box, drag it over, and put it in there. And that's like the easiest thing in the world, making sure that you line it up. If you hold down right click is how I move around the screen, but you've also got this view cube up here. And this is like a staple in like the Autodesk CAD programs. And so you can use all of that, and it's going to go through each of those and show you, hey, this is how you do this. So if you were deciding,
yeah. No, I was just saying I really love how they included tips on how you can work in the platform, because this really goes to show that anyone, even if you're just not starting off like you are showing us, with those tips, you can use that platform.
Yes, and like that's that's what's been great for me is that I've still got students at different levels who are using CAD. And so for every choice board that I've made for my students, I always include, hey, you can start with this one, or you can use one that's more advanced, whichever one that you really feel more comfortable with. And on my choice boards, I usually give writing assignments as well. And it's always interesting to me which students, sometimes I'm like, oh, they'll definitely do this. They can do that writing assignment in 30 minutes. And instead they make something complex on Tinkercad. And they're like, Mr. Bacon, I did this and this. And I'm like, I didn't think you were going to go the extra mile. I'm really proud of you. So,
but can we revisit that? You said that you give choice boards to students.
Yes.
That is
so
awesome.
I just
and include writing.
Yeah. Let me see if I can pull one up real quick. So what I do is I take some of the stuff from the district ones, and then I also just add on a few different things. And then I give some more complex directions as it goes through. Oh, I'll have to open it in this window. Sorry. If I just go.
And then remind people, what do you teach again?
So I teach engineering technology. And so Project Lead the Way did all of those different certifications for teachers. And so I did a few of those. I'm also certified to teach AP Computer Science Principles, which I've been doing this year as well. And so we get students involved with CAD. We get them involved with coding. We try to get them involved with as many things as possible. That just kind of open them up to all of those different engineering things. But, and this is a really simple one. I kind of made a choice of different choices for this week as well, since I had so many things I had built up on. But I always have something for 3D modeling in CAD. And this is just a simple view. And then as you get through there, it'll give some more complex directions. But I always do something with the modeling and drawing and the electronics as well. And I'll show some of those electronics as we keep going through today.
That is awesome.
I tried to go for a space theme for the things that we could do this week, since it was May the 4th started off the week. So, but just getting students into this sort of stuff is it's fun to me. And once they get to play around, I think they have a lot of fun as well.
Yeah, and just personal as you navigate back to your screen, and Jim and others may be disappointed in me saying this, but 2 nights ago was the very first Star Wars movie my family watched. We watched the one that came out first. And I know I know with The Office, we had a little debate on what order you should watch the Star Wars episode, but we did on.
I'm with you, Dawn.
That was your first one? I had to stop screen sharing because I was so flabbergasted.
Yeah, we did it in chronological order of when they came out. But it was pretty nice. It was good.
Amazing.
And it was because of my daughter, because her teacher asked her, what was your favorite Star Wars character? And she couldn't name one. I was like, oh, man.
That's a great experience, though. I'll never forget watching the first one with my dad at our old house a long time ago. That's great. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. All right, you can get back.
Okay.
Real quick, what is your Twitter name? Someone wants to follow you on Twitter.
Oh, that's great. It is Mr. Bacon Says, MISTER.
Got it. Thank you.
Oh, all right. Well, I'm glad to have a Twitter follower. I feel popular now. Okay. So we left off on the starters. So once you get done with the starters, in that Learn tab as well, there's also, it goes on and it goes to lessons and projects. The lessons is really where the students start to find out, here's all the stuff that's going on in Tinkercad to where I can use this and I can kind of become an advanced user. And the chess pawn is my favorite one. And I think the reason that I love this one so much, you can see how many times I've done it, right? I've built these chess pawns over and over again. And the reason that I just enjoy this one so much is it gives us those steps, kind of like what we saw before, right? So it starts off with the chess pawn and it tells you every single thing that you're going to do to build this. But what it shows as well is that here's this complex shape that we're just going to make out of all of these simple geometric shapes that we've seen dozens of times before. And so just like before, we're going to take the cylinder and we're going to drag it into that orange outline. But then it also helps you, like, it's like, okay, well, now we're going to scale it. We're going to use some of those different things that are there. It's going to show you how to use the work plane. This is something that is a staple in a lot of CAD programs as well. So when I want to add something onto another piece, instead of me, trying to, take the circle and bring it over and then, finding exactly where they meet, I'm zooming in and out. Instead, what I can do is I can add a work plane on top of it. And so now, see, that work plane is directly on top of the cylinder. And so as I continue working and continue adding things, I'm just adding on precisely where I wanted and what I wanted to do. Just as well, as you keep going through this, and I won't do every single step of this chess pawn, it'll also show you how you can join objects. So these two things here, like I've got my green ruler there, and I can see they're a little off center. So up here, I've got a line, and I can take that align tool and align them on each axis, and then I can click join, and now they're one piece, so I can move it around. So again, this is a really simple way to get into CAD, but it's absolutely fantastic. And just as well, like with this sort of stuff, it always gets to be kind of fun. What I want to do in the future is start to collaborate with some other teachers. Just in thinking about, like, we made these chess pieces, but like, where did chess come from? How did it get to be so popular? All kinds of things of that sort can kind of build onto this. And just as well, when you're working in CAD, if you've made this chess pawn, well, could you make a chess rook? Could you make a knight? Could you make those other pieces that are part of that chessboard? How would you customize them? How would you make them different? You can really build upon these things as well, which is how I really build a lot of my lessons in class. Oh, I skipped over a couple of things last time, and I want to make sure I do these while we're looking at these. And I'm going to open up some student work. I wish I had more stuff saved on Google Drive now. A lot of it's back at school. But there are also some really, really neat things that you can do within this. So showing last time, right, this is a student. So they took this phone case, and then they also added this Super Mario Ghost onto it. And so what they did is that you can use a certain file called an SVG. It's something, it's like a picture file that you can save from Adobe Illustrator. There are some online ways that you can convert a picture to an SVG. I do just want to caution, like, some of those, I don't know what kind of, malware or viruses you can get from those. So if you have access to Adobe Illustrator, it'll make it a little bit different. Or if and I don't know if there's probably a safe one out there somewhere. I just haven't really searched for it since I was able to use this. But I did have an SVG from a project we did with one of the nonprofits in Louisville. And so this group is called Nerd Louisville. And I need to go back and show this whole process. Sorry. So this group is called Nerd Louisville. We do Dungeons and Dragons club at school. And they donated as many players' handbooks and all this stuff that you could think of to play D&D to us a while back. And so we decided we wanted to 3D print them something. We could at least give them, $6 worth of plastic that we could 3D print and kind of use some of our ingenuity with that. And so me and some students, what we did was we first took their logo, right? And so I have this saved as an SVG. And so when I open that up, I can also kind of change that size in there. And so this way we can actually see it. And so that SVG file is completely black and white. And what it does is when we import it, it takes that black and white, and then it actually makes it into a 3D file that we can use and manipulate. So this is the logo for that nonprofit. And so we took that and then we used it on a dice tower that we made to give to them. So if you play Dungeons and Dragons, if you've ever seen any of those games before, you can take your dice, instead of just rolling them on the table, you put it in the top right in there, and then they kind of come out in there. And this process was so cool because we put together, we took their logo and we put it on the front and we put it on the back here as well. And then some of my advanced engineering students, as you can see here, if you've ever 3D printed anything, sometimes when you go through and to try to make something, we had this like little arch. And the first time we tried to print it, all the plastic was drooping down right there. And that was just because it didn't have a way to support it. And so we actually just made a very small, almost bridge piece to put in there as well. And I just wanted to show off some of the things that my students came up with. And this is another little piece over here. And one of my students came up with this, and he just made a little thing. This isn't the proper size for it, but it's a little place where he can put his phone, right? And then it's got a little hole in the bottom. He can put his charger through there and things of that sort. And so we've used CAD for just a lot of fun stuff that students can really play around with and do some new projects and work towards some things. Okay. Oh, one more thing before I forget this as well. So there's two other modes that are in Tinkercad as well. And I don't really use these because I've never actually messed with Minecraft at all. But up here in this blocks thing with this little Minecraft piece, if you click that there, it'll actually convert what you have into, I guess, like the Minecraft blocks and how they work. And so you can actually save these files so you can export it. And I guess this is something you could even take into Minecraft if you wanted. And then the other one, there's a bricks one. And this one actually takes your file and then builds it into Legos. So just another way that if you had students already building towards something, or maybe they wanted to come up with their design first and then build it with Legos or build it in Minecraft or take it to Minecraft, you can do that in Tinkercad and then bring it over.
Don, I just got to tell you, that is super cool. I've seen the exporting. You can take a 3D model out of Minecraft and export it. I've never seen where you can actually import it, but that is really cool. And then transferring it to the Lego design, that's just awesome. I love it.
Yeah, I was obsessed with Legos when I was a kid, and I haven't really messed with them in a long time, but I was like, this would be fun. You know, I think I'm better at CAD now than I am just envisioning something and then making it with Legos. And I think a lot of kids probably feel the same way from my class. So I thought this was just really neat as well.
Absolutely. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's perfectly fine. Anything you want to jump in with. I get so excited to talk about this sort of stuff that I could go on and on and on. So, if there's questions or comments from or if there's comments from the chat or anything, I can stop at any point. Oh my gosh, I've been going. Okay, so besides those things in Tinkercad, it actually also has a couple of things that are a little bit more specific to engineering technology. I think with the 3D design stuff, that's great. Like you can connect that to lots of things. If you've read a book and now you want the students to kind of make something, then you can't do you can't go out and get clay, or you obviously can't have like Legos in class. You can have them bring those things into CAD. But then there's also a completely other side of this that's with circuits. And I use these in my sophomore and junior engineering courses. Students learn about circuitry, and so it's great to kind of show them how these things work before we sit down and actually pull out a breadboard in class. So we understand how these things can be plugged up together and everything else. And just as well, when it comes to circuits, you can actually switch this from 3D to circuits within the lessons. And so there's starter lessons for these just the same way, where you're learning how can I take a battery, use some wires, resistors, and plug that up to a light and get that to come on. And then the lessons part here is pretty small, but the projects for these are absolutely amazing. And so they use an Arduino board. And so within these, you can take it and you open it up, and it gives you the same way. It gives you this one's in the projects. They're a little bit more difficult, but what they do is that they give you an exact picture of like, okay, this is what this is supposed to look like. Let's see. Yeah. So it tells you exactly what it's going to look like. What I did when I made this was I just opened it up in another tab, and then I worked through putting all of this together. And so in this one, I haven't finished it just yet, but what the students will create is like a color changing light. And so not only will they put all of this stuff together in there, but then they also will get to code that as well. And so they'll get to see all of those parts for that Arduino board. And you can actually take this, like if you designed it right here, you could take this, buy an Arduino board, use a breadboard, get these same components, and then actually have that working in real life as well. And so it's just a complete simulation of something that you can do. And I find this to be a lot of fun too. And this is something that I'm still really learning about as well when it comes to the Arduino boards. Yeah. And then the last one, and I showed this last time as well, and I still got to do some learning on it. You can actually create things in 3D using code. And this is like one of the neatest things I've ever seen. And I didn't know this was here until a couple of weeks ago. So over here, it's got all of the steps or all of the code that it's used to put this together. And they're kind of like the snap blocks, if you're used to code.org, using their JavaScript stuff. And so here, if I hit play, it's going to go through all of its steps, and it's going to create a Lego brick using just code. And this, I think, is just really, really, really neat. And I hope that they don't have lessons for these just yet, but I'm really looking forward to them to building some lessons in here so I can learn and then I can share those things with my students and dive into Tinkercad. But as far as using this for NTI, I think has been one of my favorite things, just because I get to kind of like choose a theme, and then as much as I'm available to my students through Google Meet, through our Google Classroom, answering questions in that way, it's just great to also have a place where there's already steps for students to build upon. So if they wanted to do something, and maybe they didn't have the time, or maybe I wasn't available at the time that they needed me, they can look at these things as well. So it's just, I hope everybody gets an opportunity to use this if it's something that you're interested in, because I think it's a great thing for students, at least to give them some choice in what they're going to do.
And I agree. We do have a question in the chat as well. And but first, Shelly Barber, she said that was over my head, but I know many students will be able to show me. And I think that's the very important, because like the last time that we talked about how sometimes you can just introduce a topic to students, and then next thing you know, they become the expert, but that is okay for them to become the experts in that. And then also, you were saying that you're still learning about some of the things that are going on in Tinkercad. So just like students, we're always learning and growing together.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then she did have a follow-up question of what links to writing do you have students complete?
So I haven't done that part as part of NTI. I've had them more so doing working through these, but usually, especially when we're in our classes, when we create something in CAD, we usually have like some sort of like purpose that we're going to do. So like one of the projects we do pretty early on is we have the students design a McDonald's toy. And so that McDonald's toy, it's going to have a theme. It's going to have the size that it's going to have to fit. And so what we have them do is we have them almost write some technical specifications, and then they also give us the rationale for everything that they decided to do. So if they were going to have it modeled after this certain cartoon, well, why did they choose that? And how is this really going to fit in there? How's this going to be fun? How's this going to help McDonald's sell more toys? And so we really do a lot of that sort of stuff. And then maybe if we make something that's been made before, or we're improving upon that, we really tell, okay, how did we improve upon this? Or like with the chess pieces, kind of what I was talking about before, what's the origin of this thing that's been made? So chess has been around for how long? I mean, it's been almost 1,000 years or a little bit more than that. So where did this come from? How did it get to this? Why are the pieces designed this way? And where did that come from?
That is awesome. Just to get students curating something that they may interact with on a regular basis, like those McDonald's pieces. It really makes it personal for those students.
It does. And Tinkercad actually has, I missed some of the things that are in here, but they've got really cool, when you go to put those together, there's actually ball joints you can put together. So you know how like toys fit together and there's a little ball piece there, it goes inside of this, so it's socketed. So when you go to 3D print, as long as you leave that hollowed out and you leave those ball joints in there, then as soon as they pull it off, they can actually just take little pieces that are connected, and then they can play with it right then. I've had a ball joint toy that we made like early on, and every time a kid comes to my room, they're like, "What is this?" And it gets played with. There's pieces of that thing everywhere at this point, but it seems simple at first, and then it's so exciting.
Yeah, it's exciting and impressive.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. We do have a couple more minutes. I didn't know if you wanted to close out with your profound closing remarks or show us something.
So I will show real quick what I was talking about there, because when you go in here, there's actually, so right here, we had the basic shapes, and we were looking at those before, but there's text and numbers. If you want the students to make characters, this is kind of where they can start there. And then the connector pieces are where we have all of these different, so there's the ball joints there, and there's all kinds of different ones as well. So depending on, like, if you wanted the piece to rotate, if you wanted to be locked in there, and those different sockets to get those connect. So that's one of those things that you don't think about when you want to make something. You want it to fit together, but how's it going to fit together? And trying to make all of these little things is actually really difficult. And so having these in Tinkercad is excellent.
Well, that's really smart, because you can only 3D print so big. So if you need to connect different pieces together to make something even bigger than you would normally print, those are really important.
Exactly. And then this has the Smithsonian part is one of my favorite parts as well, is they've got stuff that they've 3D scanned. And so like there's like busts, and there's all kinds of stuff there's there that you wanted to build upon. Like I did one of my assignments, we started with like we were talking about like lunar colonies, and I said you could write about it, or you could tell me about it, or you could show me. And so some kids decided they wanted to make something in Tinkercad and be like, oh, this is what this looks, this is what this would be like, and this is what this would be like, just using a little Screencastify video. There's that space shuttle as well. So all of that stuff's in there, and yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I echo what Shelley Barber, she said it, excellent, great ideas and reflective learning, defending, supporting with content knowledge. Thank you. You really have a lot of people thinking about, as an engineering teacher, one, I can incorporate writing in my classroom, and then just those really small details like the ball joints and other pieces that you may need to create your 3D model.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And if you need help with this sort of stuff, especially like right now, like I'd love to be able to be helpful for this, because I love creating with my students. Is my literal favorite thing. Like when they get an idea and then they dive into that, and that's what they're working on for the week. And I get to be more of a facilitator as opposed to just kind of like pointing them in the right direction. They know what they want to know, but how can I help them get there? And if I can help you all get there in any way possible, you let me know.
That's awesome. Thank you, Dawn. Thank you, Danielle.
Thank
It was
you.
an amazing session. Love that. That's just great. So up next, we have Student Safety and Supports with Brooke Budd, Crystal Wilder, and Chad Dewberry, I do believe. So that was a great session.
Hey, how's everyone doing?
Did I get it all right? All right, there you guys are.
You did it.
You did great. That was a fantastic session. Danielle, she just left, but I'm sure she's still on. I am not a self-proclaimed math nerd. I am a social worker, a school social worker, but I am super interested in graphics. So I love all that AutoCAD stuff. And I think Mr. Bacon needs to give me a private lesson and all that.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I want to look into that more now too. It was just really great because I work a lot with Minecraft, and then seeing how you could build things and import them into Minecraft, I was like, oh, that's a really cool idea.
Very, very cool.
All right. I want to hold you guys up because it's 2:02.
All right. Yeah, we'll get started. And first, a big thanks to the tech team, because I know we tried to do this last week and had some major difficulties getting my colleagues from the cabinet in. And I know they were troubleshooting a little bit today too, and have given us some good advice. So we appreciate you all for helping us get in.
No problem. Thanks for being here. I'm glad we got you all in.
So I am Brooke Bird. I'm a school social worker in the pupil personnel department underneath the culture and climate team. And I am going to share my screen and get these captions on.
So while Brooke's doing that, I am Crystal Wilder. I am a Service Region Clinical Associate here in Jefferson Region for the Cabinet for Health and Family Services, Department of Community-Based Services. Very easily put, Child Protective Services.
Yeah. And I'm Chad Dewberry. I'm with Protective Services as well. I'm a specialist here, but before that, I was an independent living worker, worked with teenagers and young youth. So I definitely respect the teachers for what they do.
All right. And I didn't see my prompt to get the captions on. So remind me where that is again.
If you're presenting slides, it'll show up on that. There
It'll show up then. Perfect.
And
there we go.
All right. And you have to hit allow.
Yep. Perfect.
You
All
got
right. So
it.
that just tells us who we are, tells you all who we are. So we're here to talk about safety supports. We've got a few training objectives today, and we want to ensure that child abuse and neglect can still be recognized and reported. We know that this is a different landscape that we're all navigating, and we want to make sure the adults who are still working with kids either virtually or who are talking to kids and families on the phone, know what to recognize and what to look and listen for. We want to support our staff who continue to provide services to kids and families. So we want them to know what to do if they suspect abuse or neglect, or if maybe a family member or a student discloses something during one of their sessions. We want them to know who to go to if they've got questions and what to do when, if and when that situation happens. And then we want to provide additional guidance and support. We know that this is an incredibly stressful situation that everyone in our community is facing. And we want staff to know what resources are available in our community to provide to students and families when they have concerns. So the rationale behind why we're having this conversation today. So children in homes where instability was already present are now at an even greater risk. We all know our kids that are vulnerable, and with heightened emotions and uncertainty, we know that that can worsen situations where violence or abuse was already present. We know that reports of child abuse right now are down, which is likely due to fewer adults being able to identify kids, not necessarily a decrease in incidences of abuse. We know that kids are no longer physically coming into our buildings. They're no longer, going to daycares or their community centers. And then we also know that teachers and other educators make up about 20% of reports for abuse and neglect. So we don't think it's because that's not happening. We think it's because there's less eyes on kids. And then a statistic that we're not very proud of is that Kentucky leads the nation in rates of child abuse and neglect. We're practicing social distancing and encouraging, everyone to stay healthy at home, but we want to make sure that the measures that we're taking aren't causing abuse and neglect to fly underneath that radar, because it's, unfortunately, home's not always a safe place for all of our children. And then we've got Maslow's hierarchy of needs there. The majority of us have seen this, and it's just to give a matter of perspective that, if kids' basic needs aren't met or if their safety is compromised, it's going to be incredibly challenging them to be engaged in learning. All right, and then I'm going to turn it over to Crystal.
Thank you so much, Brooke. I am talking about the reporting policy and how to report. If you will look at the child abuse reporting policy memo, you will have all seen that, signed that, gone through that. That is JCPS's, their memo, their understanding. I have shared with Brooke and the rest of the team. I think that this is excellent. It covers everything. There is that expectation to report abuse and neglect. So if you have not had a chance to read over that fully and completely, I hope you have, because my understanding is that everyone has had that and signed that. Please look at that. Also, it comes straight from our Kentucky statutes, our state statutes. We have the duty to report. That's within KRS 620. We are all mandated reporters. I think under under KRS 620, we have a duty to report. Anyone who knows anything about potential abuse or neglect with a child has firsthand or even secondhand information. The moment you receive that information, you become a mandated reporter. There are penalties for failure to report if that comes about as well, that it is known that there was a situation or an incident of abuse or neglect and that failure to report. Some really easy ways to call toll free. The 800-752-6200 is just one of those numbers that I commit to my memory. That is the state hotline. Very recently, we went to an all centralized intake process. You all may have called in before, and it would go to a state level or to the Jefferson County office. Now it's a statewide call center. The other is to report online. That is monitored 8 a.m. to 4:30, Monday through Friday. But if you still report that, they will get that the very next day. If it is after 4:30, contact the hotline. It is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And we'll go to the next slide. So, okay. So a lot of questions are always like, so what will be asked when I make a report? You will be asked your name and the relationship to the child or individual. Part of that is simply so we know how the information came about. Calls are and emails are able to be anonymous. You can make them through the web and not you can give a fake email. However, we strongly, strongly encourage that you give your name and information on who the reporting source is. That allows the assigned worker to follow back up. If there are any other questions about the situation, then they can follow up and also reach out for more information and at times share information. The specific information as to the nature or extent of the abuse or neglect or dependency, that is simply tell them what you know. Current location of the child, condition of the child, knowledge of any previous child abuse or neglect. That is not necessary. It's just always something that we ask because, again, if we start to see patterns, those are huge red flags to us. Any immediate safety issues for the child, but that's also as well as for our investigative worker. We want to know the situation as well as we can. I get that sometimes may not always be possible, but as well as we can for what our worker is walking into. And then it's always very important when and if possible to know the perpetrator information, including the name, relationship to the child, and the whereabouts. Sometimes this can be a bit difficult because I have received reports in the past and the report actually reads that child stated Uncle Boo did whatever, or when asked about a certain incident, it is a nickname. And so we really want to get as much information and that perpetrator information. That is not necessary. If you don't have it, please don't let that be a deterrent of not calling. And then we'll roll to the next slide, Brooke. And this one is about the actual disclosure. That is simply, as I said before, sharing what you know. A disclosure is the statement from the victim or the individual regarding the occurrence. If you hear that, witness an incident of domestic violence, or receive that information even secondhand, there again, at that moment, as we said before, you become obligated under state law to make that report. Make the report. Please don't interview the child or initiate any type of investigation. That is for a number of reasons. That's for, first and foremost, the child's safety. That's for your safety, and that's also for the integrity of the case. Because even if you did an excellent interview with the child, and I greatly appreciate the care and compassion that is shown to our children, we will have to speak to the child again, and we will have to go through that again. And we really want to limit that. However many times that the child has to tell their story. That's a difficult situation. So make the report, but don't interview the child or initiate any type of conversation or investigation. So, and now I think the next is our frequently asked questions. What is acceptance criteria? Wow, that is really broad. We have embedded some answers to those. That gives you very specifics of what acceptance criteria is. We follow our standards of practice, our SOPs. What does not meet criteria is usually what becomes a bit more hazy, such as corporal punishment is in some instances, and that's where we get really into how old is the child, where were the marks or bruises or indicators of abuse. So there again, don't hesitate to reach out. You can always know if a report has been accepted. As the reporting source, and I should have said this earlier, as the reporting source, you are always entitled to know if a report was accepted and why or why not it was accepted. If it does not meet criteria, we have that obligation, if you want to know why it did not meet criteria. To know that springs towards into, will I know if a report was accepted for an investigation, if you just make the call at that moment, you will not know if the investigation has been accepted at that time, because then it goes to a supervisor to look over what the hotline worker has done. And so they will make that determination in collaboration. And so that is, but you can always call back, you can email, you can go back. You should receive an intake referral number. Use that as your reference to want to know if that's been accepted or not. And the reasons why people don't report, there again, we have these embedded, but to know a lot of times it is fear. It is fear of not knowing the full situation. Totally understandable, but we don't ask anyone to know the full situation. If you did, we wouldn't need investigative workers, but that's part of our role. The other is you don't want to mess up the rapport that you may have with the family. I get that, but at the end of the day, we really put the child and the family safety first and foremost. So that's a quick kind of CPS in a nutshell. We're going to turn it over to Chad to talk about some ways that we can engage virtually.
Hey, how's everyone doing? Hopefully everyone's doing well. Like I said, I know all the teachers are actually engaged with the students as far as like an educational standpoint, but I want to briefly talk about what to engage with them as far as a safety and well-being standpoint. So this is what to look for and what to listen for when you engage with your students. When speaking to the students by phone, don't be afraid to ask questions such as, who is there with you? If you have a younger student that says, hey, no one's at home with me, that is a concern and CPS reportable as far as, neglect, that they're not having a suitable adult at home with them. What kind of work or school or other people are doing in the home. There could be a situation of just trying to engage to see if there's other siblings in the home that has, teachers that you kind of can collaborate with, or if the parents aren't working, it'll be a great opportunity for you to provide resources for the family. What did the student, eat for breakfast this morning, or do they know what they're having for dinner? And this is basically a general question to see if they're eating. If a student says, hey, I haven't ate in 2 or 3 days, we do have resources in the community that can assist them. So those type of engaging questions is very helpful. If a student doesn't participate in a group chat, ask the students if they have spoken to, seen, or even heard the missing student. This is more appropriate for, I'll say, older students rather than younger students, because like I said, older students are, texting in group chats. So they may can give you some information on if the student is going through some hard times or not. So definitely just be aware of that. Notice any changes or in the demeanor, any marks, bruises that a child may have. Try to, have opportunity, to ask what happened, but don't do that in a group setting. If you were doing group, meetings with your students, try to see, can you find a schedule or follow up the student privately just to kind of discuss that matter, because it could be a situation that, hey, they was playing outside and maybe have failed and caught some type of bruising, but then again, it could be something more serious. Notice people in the home when you're on your video chat. Any safety hazards, exposed wire and feces on the floors or walls. If you notice any type of, drugs or alcohol present in the home, those are some things to note. And like I said before, to talk to other, school staff about that as far as your concerns that you may have with that. When I say try assignments, do video chat, make it fun, interesting for the students, but also it gives you an opportunity to know what's going on in the home. Ask them, hey, can I see, your bedroom? Where do you sleep at? Just to make sure they are, in an environment that they're not sleeping on the floor or any hazardous areas. On the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about student safety suggestions. Do not close off any communication. Listen more than talk. Ask open-ended questions to get the students involved as well as the parents. Ask questions, but like I said, just give them an opportunity to, express themselves and let them know, that you care for them and you want to provide services and resources when possible. Be flexible. Don't be caught off guard by resistance. I know you all have been engaging with your students as well as parents ever since this Corona started, and you probably have met some resistance. Just don't be frustrated with it. Be flexible with the family, and hopefully eventually they will come along and be more engaging with you. Be persistent and possibly vary the contact method, whether it's video call, phone call, text, or email. Just like offer different various ways to have contact with them, and just be open. Have other school staff members such as the school counselor, FRISC coordinator, the MHP, classroom aide, or even administration staff reach out to the vulnerable students and families. And when all possible, utilize a staff that the family is most comfortable speaking with. This may be the teacher, but also it can be the FRISC coordinator. It can also be the teacher's aide. But like I said, just try to continue with that engagement. Just keep the open line of communication. Video chat is an option rather than a call. Like I said, with video chat, you can see more what's going on in the home rather than a phone call. On the next slide, these are some more student safety suggestions. Be mindful that people are more engaging depending on the time of day. I'm a morning person, but I know that not everyone is a morning person. So try to avoid those high stress times such as dinner time, but you may have some family members or some, parents that prefer evening phone calls. So just be flexible in that aspect to see what do they prefer as far as when you engage with them. Communicate with the siblings, teachers. I mentioned this before. Express to them that you may have some concerns, and if you express it to them, honestly, they may have the same concern that you may have. So always engage with your fellow teachers on siblings. Engagement with students as well as the parents. Ask the parent caregiver how they are doing, offer resources, more resources, and even more resources. Do not make any assumptions that everyone is fine, because the most important thing is that we want to, at this time, to provide support, but as well as the parents. And this can also be helpful when you transition to the next school year. This year, you may have had some parents that may have avoided phone calls and have, avoided interactions with the teachers. But if you engage now, going into the next school year, they may be more open to you going into the next school year, which will allow, if there are some things going on in the home, they'll be more willing to express their concerns. So with this, I'll pass this back to Brooke so she can go into some more information with you all.
Perfect. Thanks so much, guys, for all that information. It's great info for our staff that are continuing to work with kids, and especially, during this landscape of knowing kind of what to look and listen for when they're doing their virtual sessions with kids. I'm sure everybody who's listening to this has, been in the circumstance where they've had to make a report before, and we know that can be a little unsettling. But this list of JCPS support staff are really those team members that you can go to if you've got questions, or even if you just want someone to sit with you when you're making a report. These are your go-to people. And then the Crystal and Chad and their team has provided us the CPS contact list. So if you are aware that a family's already active with CPS and you know who that social worker is, you can click on this link because it gives all of the contact information for those social workers. Or if you know that a family is active, but you're not sure who the social worker is and you're wanting to contact them with additional concerns, then you can always contact your pupil personnel staff, your school social workers in elementary schools, or your assistant directors of pupil personnel, your ADPPs who work with middle and high schools. All of us are stationed in neighborhood places, which is conveniently also where our CPS members are stationed. And we've got really good working relationships with them. So usually we can go over and find out, who the social worker is and get the school staff that contact information. So it's awesome that we've got that staff listing on here. And then these are just some other resources for the abuse hotline and for the Office of the Ombudsman. And these are a few resources that I wanted to go through a couple of. COVID-19 it's the Face It movement to end child abuse. It's an initiative through COSAIR Charities to promote best practices in child abuse prevention. And it's got some really good resources on here, especially during this time. We know that our families are really having more challenges, maybe more so than even before all of this quarantine started. So it's got some really good information for caregivers on here that we can get out to our families. I'm not sure if everybody follows the JCPS Family Engagement team on Facebook, but if you don't, you should. Every Thursday at 3 o'clock, they've been doing town hall meetings and getting out some really good information to our community. And this one is linked in here from a couple weeks ago when we had some mental health practitioners talking about, keeping kids healthy at home and their mental health, healthy, and what kind of signs of behaviors are typical, what behaviors maybe aren't typical. And it was a great session. They talked about internet safety as well. So that session, that Facebook Live is linked in here. If anybody wants to go back in and look at that, big shout out to one of our school social workers, Amy, who sat on the panel. And then this last one is a community resource Google site that our team created. There's a lot of good information, and resources that are going out there. And we just wanted to streamline everything in one place. So it's got lots of different financial resources, support resources, but the one I really wanted to highlight is the mental health resources. The majority of mental health agencies in our community have transitioned to working with families virtually. So if you know that your kids are struggling, if you know that you've got families that are struggling as you're working with them, this is a pretty exhaustive list of agencies in our community that are providing supports. And the best way probably to get those families connected or those students connected with services is through your mental health practitioner or your school counselor or your family resource center coordinator. Usually one of those team members are going to be the ones that are your referral source. Again, we know that this is we're in crisis now in this quarantine, and we know that a lot of our families are struggling. So making sure that they've got the services that they need have to be a priority. And then we've got some references on here for some of the data that we used in our presentation today. So you're more than welcome to check those out as well. And then the last thing we wanted to offer it up for questions. We know that this is a conversation that we want to have. We know that we've asked a lot of our teachers during this time to learn all these new systems, to learn Google Classroom and how to plan virtually for your students and all the lessons that you've done. But what we want to make sure that we just raise the awareness about child abuse, that, we don't think that it's stopped since we've stopped going physically to school. So if there's comments or questions, I'm not sure if there's been anything that's raised in the chat.
I haven't seen anything in the chat. It was some hellos and whatnot. And people saying, great information. Ann Perryman said great information. And I absolutely agree. It's something we need to be mindful of. And it kind of drops off since we're in NTI and we're a little bit disconnected. And I think I read a report and it was saying something like over 20% of the calls that typically come in to CPS and services like that are from educators. And since we're not with the kids as much, we don't get to see it and report it as much. But we need to remember when we're doing those lives and having meets or making ourselves available so that students know that we're still that safe place to talk to. It's just being cognizant of that.
So could I add that I think that there has been some question. We are very much working, just as you all are. I know that. And so I think that there have been some questions. It's like, are you all taking reports? Are you not? We are. The way that we are going and conducting that initial investigation does look very different. The cases that are already open, we are very much trying to engage our families just as you all are. And so I would encourage you greatly to reach out if you know that or suspect that there may be a CPS worker active, because that shared information could really be vital at this time for that family.
Certainly.
Well, and the great thing is our school staff had already built relationships with all these kids, so they know them. So if there is a change in behavior, even though it might be a little bit more difficult to tell when you're working with them virtually, you still already have built that relationship. So hopefully you're able to kind of hone in on those changes, and just being diligent of it, keeping that watchful eye, open as, the million other things that we've asked you to do on a daily basis now, but just keeping that watchful eye out.
Yeah, it's really good. And like you say, knowing that, yes, we are still open, but I love that you have the resources. I'm sure a lot of teachers don't realize that website is there with the Family Community Backpack. And all those resources, then also your presentation being linked onto the digital learning training schedule pulls into all those. So lots of different ways for them to get there. So hopefully if they're seeing this or they talk about it, they can find those resources, and they're absolutely still available. Do you guys have anything in closing?
I was just going to say I am in global. I know that we are all in the same global. It's Crystal.Wilder. Please don't hesitate. If there are CPS questions specifically, I may not be able to give case-specific answers, but I can sure give any guidance and I'm happy to do that. And it's crystal.wilder@ky.gov.
Yes, and mine is chad.dewberry@kentucky.gov. Is DEWBERRY. And I'm happy to help and assist if I can.
It's outstanding. Thank you all for being here and helping our kids and families get through NTI. Great teamwork.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
No problem. Thanks for being here.
Dad.
All right, and that's going to wrap us up for the day. We're approaching 2:30, which is the end of our last live show. But if you go to the training schedule on the jcps.me/NTI website, go to the teacher backpack. When you click on the digital learning schedule, you can see all the presentations we've had. You can see the actual presentations, the resources they've used within their presentations. And then also you will see the on-demands we have at 2:30. We welcome you to watch voiceovers in Google Slides. At 3 o'clock, you could, okay, you go away. Come on, go away. Adding Spark to your NTI lessons. And then finally at 3:30, you could pull in another half hour and look at digital journaling. Now, one thing I'd like to point out, we have well over 300 different episodes and shows on our channel. So if you haven't subscribed, I would subscribe. And after that, anytime that we update and add new episodes, you will get a reminder about those. But certainly check us out for all of your training and information needs. If you don't see something on there, send us an email, hit us up on Twitter. You can check us out on Twitter. It's JCPS Digital Innovation. We use the hashtag JCPSDigIn, and we track lots of great things going on in there. And we are at JCPSDI is our digital innovation team. Or you can find any of the individuals that are on there that are with digital innovation, like myself, Jim Unger. We have yes cards that we send out, lots of appreciation being shared throughout the district right now. Jack Bosley, one of my teammates from Zone 1. But you guys have a great Thursday. Stop by tomorrow, check us out. We'll have people in the chat from the teams that are presenting, from our team, and we want to keep building our community, even in NTI. Have a good day.